I'm Elena. I'm 30 years old, and I never thought a Thanksgiving dinner could change everything. The warmth from the fireplace contrasted sharply with the cold hallways I walked through in my childhood home. After 6 years away, I returned with hope and expensive gifts, expecting a loving reunion. Instead, I witnessed the greatest betrayal that shook my soul. Before I tell you how my family forgot me on Thanksgiving, please leave a comment about where you're watching from and subscribe to see more stories about finding your self-worth. My relationship with my family had been complicated from the start. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, I was the only daughter and youngest of 4 children. My mom and dad, Diane and Clifford, always had incredibly high expectations for all of us, but somehow meeting their expectations always seemed impossible for me. While their love was always limited, my 3 older brothers, Grant, Spencer, and Cullen, were the golden children. Grant, the oldest, followed in our father's footsteps to become a successful lawyer, while Spencer became a partner at a prestigious engineering firm. Cullen excelled in finance and was already making 6 figures by age 25. In our family's eyes, they could do no wrong. Every achievement was celebrated with dinner parties and expensive gifts. When Grant got into Northwestern Law School, my family threw a lavish party inviting almost everyone in our social circle. When Spencer won his first major engineering contract, they framed the newspaper article and hung it prominently in our living room. My childhood was different. I was constantly compared to my brothers or my mom's friends' daughters. Why can't you be more like Grant? He never got anything below an A. Or look at Sarah Mitchell. She plays 3 instruments and still manages to be valedictorian. No matter what I achieved, it was never enough. I still remember when I was 16 and won first place in a national coding competition. I rushed home, trophy in hand, bursting with excitement to share my news. When I walked through the door, my parents were in the living room discussing Spencer's new promotion. "Mom, Dad, guess what?" I interrupted, unable to contain my excitement. My mother glanced at me briefly. "Not now, Elena. We're discussing something important." "But I won the national coding championship, first place." I held up my trophy. "That's nice, honey," my father said distractedly. "Did you hear about the salary increase Spencer's getting?" That was the moment something broke inside me. I realized that in their eyes, my achievements would always be secondary. That night, I made a promise to myself that one day they would have to acknowledge me. Throughout high school, I threw myself into my studies, particularly computer science and business. I was determined to build something they couldn't ignore. When college acceptance letters came, I received a full scholarship to Stanford, but even that momentous achievement was overshadowed by Colin's engagement announcement that same weekend. At my graduation from Stanford, my family attended but left early because my father had an important client meeting. No celebration dinner, not even a proper congratulations, just a quick good job from my mother before they hurried away. That was the day I decided to distance myself. I moved to San Francisco, declined their half-hearted invitations for holidays, and limited our communication to occasional phone calls. I needed space to build my life without their constant judgment. For 6 years, I worked relentlessly, starting as a software engineer at a tech company before launching my own startup. Those years were tough. I lived in a tiny apartment, worked 18-hour days, and poured everything I had into my company. All the while, my family remained largely oblivious to my struggles or successes. My mother would call occasionally, but our conversations were superficial, filled with updates about Grant's perfect legal cases or Spencer's latest engineering projects, never really asking about my life. When my company began to gain traction, securing our first major clients and attracting investor interest, I didn't share the news with them. Why bother? They had never cared before. Then, last month, something unexpected happened. My mother called, her voice unusually warm, and invited me home for Thanksgiving. "The whole family will be here," she said. "We miss you, Elena. It's time to come home." She mentioned that things had changed, that they'd been reflecting on our relationship and wanted to make amends. Against my better judgment, hope flickered inside me. Perhaps they had finally recognized their behavior. Maybe they were ready to truly see me. With that fragile hope, I accepted the invitation, deciding to give them one last chance.
Once I decided to return home for Thanksgiving, I wanted to make it special. Despite our strained relationship, I wanted to show my family that I had become successful and generous. I spent weeks selecting the perfect gifts for each family member, gifts that would show I paid attention to their interests, despite the distance between us. For my mother, I chose a platinum and sapphire necklace from Cartier, similar to one she had admired in a magazine when I was a teenager. She had sighed then, saying, "Your father would never spend that kind of money on jewelry." Now I could give her that dream piece myself. I spent $4,000 on it, not including the custom engraving. For my father, I found a rare vintage Rolex at an auction. He had always been fascinated by timepieces, though he only owned a few modest ones. This particular watch was from the 1970s, the era he always reminisced about as his prime years. It cost me $7,000, but I knew it would be something truly special that he couldn't dismiss. For Grant and his family, I arranged an all-expenses-paid 2-week trip to France. Grant had always talked about wanting to take his wife, Jessica, and their twin daughters to Europe, but with his demanding law practice, they had never prioritized it. The package included luxury accommodations, private tours, and even a personal photographer for family portraits in front of the Eiffel Tower. This gift set me back nearly $25,000. For Spencer, who had recently mentioned wanting to expand his engineering consultancy but lacking the capital, I prepared a check for $60,000 as seed money. I also commissioned a renowned artist to create a scale model of his first major bridge design, something I knew would touch him on a personal level. For Colin, who had always been passionate about vintage cars but could never afford his dream vehicle, I had purchased a restored 1967 Mustang Fastback. The car was sitting in a storage facility in Chicago, waiting for the right moment to surprise him. This was my most expensive gift at $80,000, but Colin had always been the brother who showed me the most kindness growing up. As I wrapped each gift, I couldn't help but wonder if they would finally see me differently. Would these tangible demonstrations of my success and thoughtfulness finally earn their respect, or at least their acknowledgement? The week before Thanksgiving, I boarded a first-class flight from San Francisco to Chicago. As the plane took off, anxiety and anticipation fought for dominance in my mind. Part of me was excited at the prospect of reconciliation, while another part remained guarded, remembering countless disappointments. During the 4-hour flight, I rehearsed conversations in my head, imagining different scenarios of how my family might react to seeing me after so long. Would they be warm and welcoming, or would they treat me with the same dismissive attitude I remembered? I ordered a glass of champagne to calm my nerves, then another, trying to quiet the doubts swirling in my mind. When we landed, I collected my luggage and headed for the rental car counter. I had reserved a black Tesla Model S, knowing it would make an impression when I pulled into my parents' driveway. It was an indulgence, but I wanted that moment of recognition when they saw me emerge from a luxury vehicle that I had paid for myself. The drive from O'Hare Airport to my childhood home in Winnetka took about 45 minutes. As familiar landmarks appeared, memories flooded back, both good and bad. The ice cream shop where my father would occasionally take us on summer evenings, the park where my mother would read while ignoring my attempts to show her the sandcastles I built, the high school where I spent 4 years feeling invisible despite being valedictorian. When I finally turned onto my parents' street, I felt my heart rate accelerate. Their house looked exactly as I remembered it, a Georgian-style home with perfect landscaping and tasteful Thanksgiving decorations. No gaudy inflatable turkeys or excessive autumn displays for the Richardson family, Only elegant wreaths and subtle warm lights that signaled refined taste to anyone passing by. I parked behind Grant's Mercedes and Spencer's Audi, taking a moment to collect myself before gathering the carefully wrapped presents from the trunk. The weight of the gifts in my arms felt like armor as I walked up the brick path to the front door. Standing there, I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell, the same chime I had heard thousands of times growing up. As I waited for someone to answer, I straightened my posture and put on a confident smile. Whatever happened inside this house, I was no longer the overlooked little girl desperate for approval. I was Elena Richardson, a successful tech entrepreneur who had built something meaningful on her own terms. The door swung open, and for the first time in 6 years, I stood face to face with my past.
The door opened to reveal my mother, Diane, looking exactly as I remembered her. Perfectly styled auburn hair, flawless makeup, and a designer outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. For a split second, her eyes widened in what looked like genuine surprise, as if she hadn't actually expected me to come. "Elena," she said, her voice carrying that familiar, controlled tone. "You're here." No warm embrace, no exclamation of joy, just a polite acknowledgement of my presence. She stepped aside to let me in, her gaze dropping to the pile of gifts in my arms. "My, you've brought quite a lot." "It's Thanksgiving," I replied, trying to keep my voice light, "and it's been a while." As I stepped into the foyer, the house smelled exactly as it always had during the holidays: cinnamon, nutmeg, and the faint scent of my mother's expensive perfume. The familiarity was both comforting and unsettling. My father appeared from his study looking older than I remembered. His hair had more gray, and the lines around his eyes had deepened. He approached with a hesitant smile, clearly uncomfortable. "Elena," he said, awkwardly patting my shoulder. "Good to see you. The drive from the airport okay?" "It was fine, Dad. I rented a car." I gestured toward the Tesla outside. "It looks expensive," he commented, though I couldn't tell if he was impressed or disapproving. Before I could respond, the sound of children's laughter echoed from the living room, and moments later, Grant appeared with his family. His wife, Jessica, gave me a polite smile, while their twin daughters, Sophia and Emma, both 10 years old, stared at me with curiosity. "Aunt Elena!" Sophia exclaimed, clearly having been prepped for my arrival. "Daddy showed us your picture." Grant stepped forward, giving me a brief one-armed hug. "Hey, little sis, you look good. Silicon Valley must be treating you well." There was an undercurrent to his words, something between surprise and assessment, as though he was mentally calculating my success based on my appearance. "It's San Francisco, actually, and yes, things are going well." Jessica approached, her designer outfit and perfectly highlighted hair making it clear she had fully embraced the Richardson family aesthetic. "Elena, it's so nice to finally meet you. Grant talks about you sometimes." The emphasis on sometimes wasn't lost on me. Little Emma, the shyer of the twins, tugged at my coat. "Are you really our aunt? I never saw you before." Her innocent comment stung more than any cold greeting from my parents. I knelt down to her level. "Yes, I am. And I'm sorry I haven't been around, but I'm here now. Would you like to help me put these presents under the tree?" Emma nodded enthusiastically, her face lighting up at the mention of presents. As we moved toward the living room, Spencer emerged from the kitchen with a beer in hand, his face breaking into what seemed like a genuine smile. "Elena!" he exclaimed, approaching for a real hug. "It's about time you came home." Of all my family members, Spencer had always been the most supportive, though our contact had also dwindled over the years. "It's good to see you, Spencer," I said, meaning it. He helped me with some of the presents, whispering, "Fair warning, Mom's been on edge planning everything. Dad's practice lost a big client last month, and Grant's been insufferable about his latest case win."
I appreciated the insider information, though it did little to ease the tension I felt. Colin was the last to appear, coming through the front door with his girlfriend Rachel, just as we were arranging presents. He looked successful in his tailored suit, every inch of the financial advisor he'd become. "Well, well," he said, taking off his coat, "the prodigal daughter returns." There was warmth in his voice, but also something else. Maybe resentment, maybe curiosity. He gave me a hug that lasted a moment longer than necessary. "You look like you've done well for yourself," he observed, taking in my appearance. "I can't complain," I replied diplomatically. Rachel, a petite blonde who looked like she'd stepped out of a country club magazine, smiled brightly. "I've heard so much about you. Grant says you're in computers?" The pre-Thanksgiving dinner that evening was an exercise in strained politeness. We sat around the dining table that had witnessed countless family meals, the fine china and crystal glasses reflecting the warm light from the chandelier above. My mother had prepared her famous herb-crusted turkey with all the traditional sides, a meal that had always signified special occasions in our household. Throughout dinner, the conversation flowed around me rather than including me. My mother dominated the discussion, focusing on Grant's recent victory in a high-profile lawsuit. "The youngest attorney to win a case of that magnitude," she boasted, refilling his wine glass. "We always knew you were destined for greatness." Jessica chimed in with stories about the twins' accomplishments, Sophia's debate team victories, Emma's advanced math program, and their acceptance into an elite private middle school. When Spencer mentioned his firm's new contract to design a sustainable housing development, my father finally perked up. "That's excellent, son. Green technology is where the money is these days. Smart positioning for your firm." I waited for a natural opening to share something about my life. When there was finally a lull in the conversation, I spoke up. "I've had some exciting developments with my company, too. We're launching a revolutionary AI platform next quarter that's already generating significant investor interest." My mother nodded distractedly. "That's nice, dear. Oh, Jessica, did you tell Elena about the charity auction you organized last month? It raised over $50,000 for children's literacy." And just like that, the conversation shifted away from me again. I caught Spencer giving me an apologetic look across the table, but he didn't intervene. As dessert was served, my father briefly asked, "So, this company of yours, is it actually profitable? Tech startups are notorious for burning through cash." Before I could answer with the truth that we had just closed a Series C funding round and were projecting 9-figure revenues, my mother interrupted. "Clifford, business talk is hardly appropriate for Thanksgiving Eve. Let's keep things festive." She turned to Jessica's grandwife. "Jessica, would you help me bring in coffee?" The evening continued in this pattern. Every attempt I made to share my accomplishments was either dismissed or redirected. By the time we moved to the living room, little Emma surprised me by crawling onto my lap. "Aunt Elena, what do you really do? Do you make important things?" I smiled at her genuine interest. "Yes, in a way. I make computer programs that help businesses communicate better and make smarter decisions." "Like helping people talk to each other?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Exactly like that, but for companies." She nodded solemnly. "That sounds really important. Mommy says communication is everything." For those few minutes talking with Emma, I felt more valued than I had all evening with the adults. As the night wound down, I retreated to my old bedroom, now converted into a generic guest room with barely a trace of my childhood left. Sitting on the unfamiliar bed in my once familiar room, I felt a complex mix of disappointment and determination. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving, and I had carefully selected gifts that would finally show them who I'd become. Perhaps the magic of Thanksgiving morning would break through the walls between us.
Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and clear, sunlight streaming through the guest room windows and reflecting off the frost that had formed overnight. For a moment, lying in bed and hearing the distant sounds of children's excited voices, I felt a flash of childhood nostalgia.
Then reality returned as I remembered where I was and the emotional distance that separated me from my family, despite our physical proximity. I rose early, determined to make one more effort to connect. In the kitchen, I began preparing a special breakfast, a family tradition that had somehow survived my mother's attempts to modernize everything else. Pumpkin spice pancakes with maple butter, thick-cut bacon, and my father's favorite fresh squeezed orange juice. The familiar motions of cooking were soothing, and I hoped the gesture would be appreciated. By 8 o'clock, everyone had gathered in the kitchen, drawn by the delicious aromas. Grant's twins bounced with excitement, already dressed in matching autumn-themed outfits that Jessica had clearly coordinated. "Aunt Elena made breakfast," Emma announced proudly, as though she had been part of the planning. My mother surveyed the spread with a tight smile. How thoughtful. I had planned to serve the croissants from that French bakery downtown, but this is nice, too. "This looks amazing, Elena," Spencer said, grabbing a plate and serving himself generously. My father nodded in agreement, though he seemed preoccupied with his phone, probably checking emails despite the holiday. Grant and Jessica murmured their thanks while serving their daughters. Sophia took one bite of the pancakes and declared, "Grandmas are fluffier," earning a pleased smile from my mother. "Well, I haven't made these in years," I said lightly, trying not to let the comment sting. "They're perfect," Emma whispered to me conspiratorially, and once again I found myself grateful for this child's unfiltered kindness. After breakfast, everyone gathered in the living room around the towering Christmas tree that had been repurposed for Thanksgiving with autumn decorations. Presents were piled underneath, wrapped in coordinating paper that reflected my mother's meticulous attention to aesthetic detail. My gifts, wrapped in elegant gold paper I had brought from San Francisco, stood out slightly from the carefully curated collection. "Time for presents," my mother announced, clapping her hands together. She had always appointed herself as the distributor of gifts, controlling the pace and order of opening. Children first, of course. Grant's twins tore into their presents with abandon, squealing with delight at each new treasure. They received an abundance of gifts from my parents, everything from the latest Apple products to expensive clothing from boutique stores. The pile of open presents grew steadily around them. "And these special ones are from Aunt Elena," my mother said, handing them packages I had brought. Sophia opened her professional art set with a polite thank you, though her eyes had already moved on to the next gift. Emma was more enthusiastic about the high-tech microscope I had chosen specifically to nurture her interest in science, immediately asking me to show her how it worked. Next came the adults' turn. My father received several expensive ties, golf accessories, and books from my mother and brothers. When he opened my gift, the vintage Rolex, his eyebrows raised in genuine surprise. "This is quite something," he said, examining it carefully. "Must have cost a fortune." "It's from the 70s, the era you always talk about as your favorite." He nodded, looking at me with what seemed like new consideration. "Thank you, Elena. It's very thoughtful." My mother received silk scarves, perfume, and a spa package from the others. When she opened my gift, the Cartier necklace, she gasped audibly. "My goodness," she said, lifting it from the box. "This is certainly extravagant." "You once mentioned wanting one like it," I remembered. A flash of something crossed her face, recognition perhaps, or discomfort at being known so well by the daughter she had kept at a distance. "It's lovely. Thank you," she said, placing it back in the box rather than putting it on. Spencer was genuinely moved by both the check and the building model. "Elena, this is incredible," he said, examining the detailed replica. "You really shouldn't have. It's too much." "It's not," I assured him. "I believe in what you're doing." Grant and Jessica were speechless when they opened the envelope containing the France trip details. "We couldn't possibly accept this," Jessica stammered, though her eyes betrayed her desire to do exactly that. "Consider it making up for missed birthdays and holidays," I said with a smile. "Plus, I'd love to see pictures of the girls experiencing the Louvre for the first time." Colin was still admiring photos of his vintage Mustang when the realization hit everyone.
As the gift opening continued, I noticed something strange. Everyone had opened multiple presents, including my generous gifts to them, but nothing had been handed to me. The pile under the tree dwindled until only a few small packages remained, none of which were directed my way. An awkward silence fell over the room as the realization dawned that I was the only one without gifts. I felt my cheeks grow warm with embarrassment and hurt, but I maintained my composure, determined not to show how deeply this exclusion wounded me. Emma, with a child's innocent directness, broke the silence. "Where are Elena's presents?" My mother let out a sharp, uncomfortable laugh. "Oh my, we forgot you!" she exclaimed, as though my absence from the gift exchange was a minor oversight rather than a glaring omission. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Well, we weren't sure you were coming until recently." Grant avoided eye contact entirely, suddenly very interested in helping Sophia with her new tablet. Jessica gave me a look that might have been intended as sympathetic, but came across as pitying. Spencer was the only one who seemed genuinely distressed. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "I have something for you, Elena. It's just not wrapped yet." But his hasty assurance only underscored the reality. No one had thought to get me anything. After 6 years away, returning with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of thoughtful gifts to them, I was still an afterthought in my own family. The room had grown tense, everyone waiting for my reaction. I could see it in their eyes. They expected tears, perhaps, or an angry outburst. My mother's slight smirk suggested she might even have been anticipating a scene, some confirmation that I was still the emotional, overlooked little sister desperate for attention. In that moment, looking at their expectant faces, something crystallized within me. This wasn't an oversight. This was a message, and suddenly, I knew exactly how to respond.
The silence in the room was deafening as everyone waited for my reaction. I could feel the weight of their stares. This was the moment that would define everything moving forward. I took a deep breath and did the last thing they expected. I smiled. "It's okay," I said calmly. "Look what I got myself." With deliberate movements, I reached for my phone and opened my photo gallery. The confusion on their faces was palpable. "I've been meaning to share some news with you all," I continued steadily. "Since none of you have really asked about my life these past few years, I thought now might be a good time for an update." I handed my phone to my father first, showing him photos of my tech company headquarters in San Francisco, a stunning glass building with my company's logo prominently displayed. "This is my company, Neural Dynamics. We created a revolutionary artificial intelligence platform that's now being used by over 60% of Fortune 500 companies." I swiped to show me with recognizable tech CEOs. These are some of our clients and partners. My father's expression transformed from confusion to stunned disbelief. He handed the phone to my mother. "4 months ago," I continued as the phone circulated, "we finalized an acquisition deal. Microsoft purchased Neural Dynamics for $950 million. Grant's sharp intake of breath was audible. Jessica's jaw dropped. Colin stopped examining his car photos entirely. As founder and majority shareholder, after taxes and employee equity distribution, I walked away with just over $320 million. $320 million? My father whispered. "Yes, but the money isn't what I'm most proud of." I showed them photos of a modern building with Richardson Foundation on its entrance. "This is my philanthropic organization. We provide technology education and entrepreneurial support to young women from underprivileged backgrounds, girls like me who might have potential that others failed to recognize." My mother's face flushed at the pointed comment. "We've already awarded 80 full college scholarships and funded 23 women-led startups. Fortune magazine recognized us as one of the most promising new philanthropic ventures in the country." I showed them the magazine cover. "I'm receiving an innovation award in New York next week, then flying to London to open our first international office." Emma piped up. "You're in a magazine. Are you famous, Aunt Elena?"
Not exactly famous, sweetheart. Just doing work that matters. Spencer recovered first. Elena, this is incredible. Why didn't you tell us? I met his gaze. When exactly should I have told you? During the 6 Thanksgivings I wasn't invited to? Or yesterday when everyone was too busy discussing Grant's case to ask about my life? Grant looked embarrassed. We had no idea. Because none of you ever asked. I showed them my oceanfront home, my art collection featured in Architectural Digest, my luxury vehicles. My mother tried to regain composure. Well, you've done quite well, though I hope success hasn't forgotten family and finding a good husband. Money isn't everything. It was classic manipulation, diminishing my achievements because they didn't fit her narrow definitions. Actually, Mother, I haven't forgotten family. I've created one. Brilliant, supportive people who value each other's contributions. As for finding a husband, I'm quite content. I paused, meeting their gazes. And you're right, money isn't everything. Respect, kindness, and recognizing others' worth are equally important, values I had to learn on my own. The comment sent ripples of discomfort through the room. My mother's smile froze. My father looked down. Grant became fascinated with helping Sophia. I don't share this to boast. I share it because for years I felt invisible here. I hoped if I achieved enough, you might finally see me. Eventually, I realized I needed to see myself first, to recognize my own worth, rather than waiting for your approval. Emma climbed onto my lap. I like your house with the pool. Can we visit? Of course, sweetheart. I'd love that. My revelation left everyone in various states of shock. My father looked stunned, processing everything. My mother struggled between pride and dismay at her disrupted hierarchy. Grant seemed torn between jealousy and newfound respect. Jessica calculated social advantages. Colin raised his coffee mug. To Elena, the most successful Richardson of us all. Spencer appeared genuinely happy, his acknowledgement meaning more than any magazine cover. The hours following were charged with tension. The family seemed unsure how to process this new version of me, no longer the overlooked little sister, but a powerful woman who had built an empire while they weren't paying attention. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. The rest of Thanksgiving Day unfolded differently than any Richardson family gathering I could remember. There was an authenticity to our interactions that had been missing for decades. The walls of pretense and performance had begun to crumble, revealing glimpses of the people my family members truly were beneath their carefully constructed facades. About an hour after my revelation, there was a soft knock on the guest room door. My father stood there looking uncharacteristically hesitant. Elena, could we talk in my study? I followed him to the wood-paneled room that had always been his sanctuary. As a child, being summoned to the study usually meant I was in trouble. Today, the power dynamic was noticeably different. He closed the door and gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk, but instead of taking his usual position behind it, he sat in the chair beside me. I owe you an apology, he began, his voice rough with emotion. Several, actually. I remained silent, allowing him the space to continue. I've been thinking about what you said about being invisible in this family. You're right. Your mother and I failed you. He rubbed his hand across his face. There's no excuse, but there is an explanation, if you're willing to hear it. I nodded, surprised by his vulnerability. Your mother had very specific ideas about what your life should look like. When you showed interest in technology and business, traditionally male domains, she worried. She pushed me to redirect you toward more suitable pursuits. And you went along with it, I stated matter-of-factly. I did. It was easier than fighting her, and I told myself it was in your best interest. I was wrong. He looked directly at me. When you left after college, your mother was convinced you'd struggle and come back home. When you didn't, when we heard rumors of your success through distant connections, she became defensive. I should have reached out to you independently. Your success is extraordinary, Elena. I'm proud of you, not just for what you've achieved, but for how you did it, on your own terms, despite our lack of support. The conversation with my father was just the beginning. Later that afternoon, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my mother as she prepared dessert. "So," she said without looking up, "you've done quite well for yourself." "Yes, I have," I replied simply. She continued working, pressing harder than necessary on the pie crust. "I suppose you think we're terrible parents for not recognizing your potential." "I'm curious," I said, ignoring her defensive tone. "Were you really surprised by my success, or just surprised that I achieved it without your approval?" Her hands stilled. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, but instead her shoulders slumped slightly. "Both, perhaps." She finally looked at me. "You were always different, Elena. Stubborn, independent. You reminded me so much of myself at your age, before I chose this life." That revelation stopped me cold. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "I had ambitions too. I was accepted to Northwestern's business program with plans for law school. My parents were horrified, insisted it wasn't feminine, that no man would want an overeducated wife." A bitter smile crossed her face. "I gave it up, met my father, became the perfect corporate wife and mother. When I saw the same spark in you, I thought I was protecting you from disappointment. By discouraging me at every turn, I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. By steering you toward a life with guarantees. What you were pursuing seemed so risky. And yes, I admitted reluctantly, perhaps I was envious of your courage to pursue what I had abandoned." Her honesty, however belated, was disarming. I had never seen my mother as anything but the formidable woman who had shaped my childhood. Recognizing her as someone with her own disappointed dreams added a dimension to our relationship I hadn't considered. "We can't change the past, but we could try for something better going forward." She nodded, a tentative truce established between us. The conversation with Grant was more straightforward. He caught me alone before dinner, looking uncharacteristically humbled. "I've been a terrible brother," he admitted without preamble. "I took for granted that I was the golden child, never questioning why you were treated differently. I should have stood up for you." "Yes, you should have. But we were all playing the roles assigned to us. You did what was expected. While you blazed your own trail," he said with newfound respect. "I've spent my life trying to please Mom and Dad. You had the courage to disappoint them, and look where it got you." Spencer found me on the back porch watching the sunset. He handed me a small, hastily wrapped package. "I really did get you something," he said. "It's not much compared to what you've achieved." Inside was a framed photo of the two of us from high school, after I'd won that coding competition. Spencer had his arm around me, both of us grinning widely. "You're the only one who came to that competition," I remembered. He nodded. "I was always proud of you, Elena. I just wasn't brave enough to stand against the family current." He looked at me earnestly. "I want to be a better brother moving forward." The most touching moment came from little Emma, who approached me with a crayon drawing. "I made you a present, Aunt Elena," she said solemnly. "It's you and me at your swimming pool." I knelt down to hug her. "This is the best gift I've received in years." She looked up at me with innocent eyes. "Grandma was wrong to forget you. I won't ever forget you." That evening, I gathered everyone in the living room for one final announcement. "I have one more surprise," I said. "I recently made an investment that's particularly meaningful to me." I handed my father an envelope containing property documents. "You bought our house?" my mother gasped. "Not exactly. I established a trust that will maintain ownership of this property for our family permanently. No matter what financial challenges may come, this home will remain in the Richardson family." My father looked at the papers in disbelief. "Elena, this is extraordinary. But why?" "Because, despite everything, this is where our family story began. I want to preserve that history while giving us the chance to write better chapters going forward. I looked around at their faces. I have one condition: that we treat each other with respect and genuine care, that we see and value each person for who they truly are. One by one, they nodded in agreement. The remainder of Thanksgiving unfolded with an authenticity that had been missing for years. As I prepared to return to San Francisco, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope for our family's future.
In the days following Thanksgiving, before I returned to San Francisco, we began establishing new patterns of interaction that felt tentative but genuine. The emotional walls that had defined our family dynamics for decades didn't crumble overnight, but cracks had appeared, letting in light where there had been only shadow. I spent Friday morning teaching Emma how to use her new microscope, showing her how to examine flower petals and leaves from the backyard. Her wonder at seeing the intricate structures invisible to the naked eye reminded me of my own childhood fascination with discovery, a passion that had gone largely unnoticed by my family until now. "Aunt Elena," she whispered as we looked at a maple leaf sample, "you're really smart. I want to be like you when I grow up." Her innocent declaration touched something deep in my heart. This child saw possibilities where others had seen problems, potential where others had seen defiance. "You can be anything you want to be, Emma. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Saturday brought a longer conversation with Spencer over coffee at a local cafe. Away from the family home, he opened up about his own struggles with our parents' expectations. "I've always felt trapped," he admitted. "Dad wanted me to be an engineer like him. Mom wanted me married with children by now. I've been living their version of success instead of figuring out what success means to me." "It's not too late to change course," I said gently. "Look at what you've built already. Your sustainable housing projects are making a real difference." He smiled ruefully. "Easy to say, harder to do. I don't have $300 million giving me the freedom to make bold choices." "Spencer, I started my company with $23,000 in savings and a laptop in a studio apartment. The money came later, after years of 18-hour days and countless rejections. You already have more resources and experience than I did when I began." That seemed to shift something in his perspective. We spent the rest of our time discussing his business plans and how my foundation might support community-focused architectural projects. Grant approached me Sunday morning as I was packing. His usual confidence had been replaced by something more vulnerable. "Jessica and I talked after your revelation," he said. "We've been so focused on keeping up appearances, on maintaining the perfect family image, that we've lost sight of what actually matters." He paused. "We want the girls to have a different kind of relationship with their family than we did." "What does that look like?" I asked. "Starting with honesty. No more pretending everything is perfect. No more dismissing their interests if they don't match our expectations." He looked at me directly. "We want them to know their Aunt Elena, not just as the successful businesswoman, but as the person who fought for her dreams despite the odds." Even Colin surprised me with his perspective when he found me on the back porch that evening. "You know what impressed me most about your story," he said. "It wasn't the money or the recognition. It was that you never became bitter. After everything our family put you through, you came back with gifts and hope for reconciliation. That takes a bigger person than I think I am." I considered his words carefully. "I did become bitter, Colin. For years I carried anger and hurt, but I learned that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It only hurts you." "So how did you let it go?" "By realizing that my worth wasn't dependent on their recognition. Once I truly believed that, I could engage with them from a place of strength rather than need." The most profound conversation came with my mother on my final evening.
She found me in the guest room, carrying a cup of tea and wearing an expression I'd never seen before, uncertainty mixed with something that looked like respect. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about the dreams I abandoned," she began, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. I waited, sensing she needed space to find her words. "I told myself I was being practical, choosing security over risk, but watching you succeed on your own terms, I realized I was just afraid. Afraid of failing, afraid of judgment, afraid of being different from what was expected. Those are reasonable fears," I said. "The difference is you let them make your decisions for you." She nodded slowly. "Yes, and I'm sorry for that. You deserved a mother who encouraged your dreams, not one who tried to limit them to make herself feel better about her own choices." It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. For the first time, I saw my mother not as the formidable woman who had shaped my difficult childhood, but as someone who had been shaped by her own difficult circumstances. "What would you do differently now?" I asked. "I don't know if it's too late to find out," she said with a tentative smile. "But maybe I could start by supporting other women who are brave enough to pursue what I wasn't." Before I left on Monday morning, I gathered everyone for a final family meeting. "I want you all to know that my offer to visit San Francisco stands, but more than that, I want us to stay connected in meaningful ways, not just holiday cards and polite phone calls, but real conversations about what's happening in our lives." I looked at each of them in turn. I've spent years building a business empire, but I'm just beginning to understand how to build something more valuable, authentic relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Emma hugged my legs tightly. "Promise you won't disappear again?" "I promise," I said, meaning it. "And you promise to keep exploring and learning?" She nodded solemnly. "I promise too." As I drove away from my childhood home for what felt like the first time as an adult rather than an escaped child, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. The house in my rear-view mirror looked the same, but the people inside it and my relationship with them had been fundamentally transformed. I wasn't naive enough to think all our problems were solved. Changing decades of family dynamics would take time, patience, and continued effort from everyone involved. But for the first time since childhood, I felt like we were all committed to trying. The empire I had built in Silicon Valley had given me financial freedom and professional recognition. But this weekend had shown me the possibility of building something even more valuable, a family based on acceptance rather than performance, love rather than conditional approval. And that felt like the greatest success of all.
6 months after that transformative Thanksgiving, my life had evolved in ways I never expected. The foundation was thriving, we had opened our London office, and the awards and recognition continued to pour in. But the most meaningful changes weren't visible in any magazine profile or business journal feature. My relationship with my family had become something I actually looked forward to rather than endured. We spoke regularly now, not the stilted, obligatory calls of the past, but genuine conversations about our lives, challenges, and dreams. Emma called me every Sunday evening to tell me about her week. She had become fascinated with marine biology after our microscope sessions, and I had arranged for her to visit an aquarium research lab in Chicago. Her excitement was infectious as she described the sea creatures she had observed. "Aunt Elena, did you know that octopuses have 3 hearts?" she asked during one call, her voice filled with wonder. "I did not know that," I replied, smiling at her enthusiasm. "What else did you learn?" She proceeded to tell me about cephalopod intelligence, bioluminescence, and her plans to become a marine biologist. This child, who had barely known I existed 8 months ago, was now sharing her dreams with me as naturally as breathing. Spencer had taken our conversation to heart and made significant changes to his business model. Using the seed money I had provided, he had pivoted his firm towards sustainable, affordable housing projects. He called me one evening, excited to share news about a contract to design eco-friendly housing for a low-income community in Detroit. "I never thought I could make a living doing work that actually matters," he told me. "But you were right. Having a clear mission attracts the right clients and partners." His success was deeply satisfying, not because of any financial return, but because he had found the courage to align his work with his values. Grant had surprised me the most. He and Jessica had made significant changes to their family dynamic, prioritizing genuine connection over perfect appearances. They had even scaled back their social obligations to spend more quality time with Sophia and Emma. "You know what's funny?" Grant said during a video call. "I was so worried about maintaining our family's reputation that I forgot to actually enjoy my family. The girls are happier, Jessica is more relaxed, and I actually look forward to coming home now." The change in my parents was perhaps the most profound. My mother had taken steps to re-engage with the ambitions she had abandoned decades earlier. She had enrolled in a business law course at Northwestern's continuing education program and was volunteering with a nonprofit that provided legal aid to women entrepreneurs. "I'll never know what my career might have been," she told me during one of our increasingly frequent phone calls, "but I can help other women avoid the mistakes I made." My father had begun reaching out to me for business advice, not from a position of condescension, but with genuine respect for my expertise. He had even referred several of his clients to consult with my foundation about incorporating technology into their operations. "I wish I had asked for your input years ago," he admitted. "I let pride and outdated assumptions prevent me from recognizing what you had accomplished." But the relationship that had evolved most dramatically was with Colin. After our conversation about bitterness and forgiveness, he had done his own soul-searching about his priorities and values. He called me in February with unexpected news. He was leaving his high-paying but unfulfilling job in financial services to start a nonprofit focused on financial literacy and underserved communities. "I've been thinking about what you said about worth not being dependent on others' recognition," he explained. "I've realized I've been chasing approval and status instead of meaning. I want to build something that actually helps people." When I visited Chicago in March for a foundation event, Colin was there to support the launch. Seeing him light up as he talked about his new mission reminded me of the brother who had once genuinely cared about my achievements, before family dynamics had taught us all to compete rather than collaborate. The most touching development came when my mother called in April to tell me about a conversation she'd had with Emma. She told me, "Your niece asked me why we used to ignore you," she said quietly. I told her the truth, that we were wrong, that we had been so focused on what we thought success should look like, that we missed seeing the remarkable person you were becoming. She paused. Emma said something that stopped me in my tracks. She said, "But Grandma, Aunt Elena is the most successful person I know, and not just because of her company. She's successful because she's kind, and she helps people, and she keeps learning new things." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. That little girl has more wisdom than most adults. "She gets it from you," my mother replied. "You've shown her that success isn't about impressing others or fitting into predetermined boxes. It's about being true to yourself and using your gifts to make a difference." The conversation that meant the most to me came in May when Spencer called to tell me about a family dinner they'd had the night before. Dad was telling stories about when we were kids, but for the first time, he included stories about you, not dismissive ones, but proud ones. He talked about your science fair victories, your programming skills, your determination. Mom added details I'd never heard before, about how you'd stay up late reading computer manuals and building websites for fun. He paused. It was like they were finally seeing and acknowledging the child you had been, the one they had overlooked at the time. "It's never too late for recognition," I replied, though privately I noted how much it still meant to me to hear that they were finally proud of who I had been, not just who I had become. As spring turned to summer, I began preparing for their visit to San Francisco. I had invited the entire family to spend a week with me in July, and everyone had accepted enthusiastically. I found myself looking forward to showing them my life, not as a display of wealth or success, but as a sharing of the world I had built for myself. I wanted them to meet my colleagues, see the foundation's work in action, and understand the daily rhythms of a life lived according to my own values and priorities. But more than that, I was excited about the possibility of creating new memories together. Memories based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and shared experiences rather than the performance and judgment that had characterized our past interactions. The girl who had once felt invisible in her own family was now surrounded by people who not only saw her clearly, but were inspired by what they saw. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned to see myself with the same clarity and compassion. The empire I had built in business was impressive, but the empire of authentic relationships I was constructing felt like a far more meaningful legacy.
July arrived with the anticipation I hadn't felt since childhood Christmas mornings. My family was coming to San Francisco for a week-long visit, and I had planned every detail to ensure they experienced not just my success, but the life I had built around meaningful work and authentic relationships. I picked them up at the airport in my Tesla, watching their faces as we drove through the city toward my home in the hills. Emma pressed her nose to the window, marveling at the Golden Gate Bridge, while my parents took in the innovative architecture and bustling energy of the tech capital. "It's so different from Chicago," my mother observed. "More alive somehow." "That's what I love about it," I replied. "Everyone here is building something, creating something, pushing boundaries." When we arrived at my house, the reactions were everything I had hoped for. Emma immediately ran to the infinity pool, squealing with delight as she saw how it seemed to merge with the ocean horizon. My father stood on the deck, taking in the panoramic view of the Pacific. "This is remarkable, Elena," he said quietly. "You've built something extraordinary here." But it was Spencer's reaction that touched me most. He walked through each room slowly, studying the architectural details, the way natural light filled every space, the seamless integration of technology and comfort. "This isn't just a house," he said finally. "It's a statement about how you want to live. Every choice reflects your values." That evening, I hosted a dinner party for my family and some of my closest colleagues and friends. I wanted them to meet the people who had become my chosen family, brilliant, passionate individuals who had supported my journey and shared my commitment to making a difference. Dr. Sarah Chen, my lead researcher, engaged Emma in a fascinating conversation about marine conservation technology. Within minutes, Emma was describing her octopus research with scientific vocabulary that impressed everyone at the table. My business partner, Marcus Rodriguez, shared stories with Spencer about sustainable architecture projects they were funding through the foundation. By the end of the evening, they were discussing a potential collaboration. But it was my mother's conversation with Rachel Kim, our foundation's program director, that surprised me most. Rachel had grown up in a working-class immigrant family and had built her career despite numerous obstacles. "Your daughter gave me my first big break," Rachel told my mother. "She saw potential in me when others just saw risk. She's changed hundreds of lives through the foundation, but she's also changed lives one conversation at a time." I watched my mother absorb this perspective, seeing me not through the lens of family disappointment, but through the eyes of someone whose life I had impacted positively. The next few days were filled with experiences I had carefully curated to show different aspects of my world. We visited the foundation's offices, where my mother met young women from backgrounds similar to her own, who were building tech startups with our support. One entrepreneur, Maria Santos, was developing an app to help undocumented immigrants access essential services safely. As she told her story, I saw my mother's eyes fill with tears. "Your foundation didn't just give me funding, you gave me credibility.
When Elena Richardson backs your vision, doors open that were previously locked. We toured my company's former headquarters, now a tech incubator for emerging businesses. Grant was fascinated by the collaborative workspace model, so different from the competitive law firm environment he was used to. Everyone here seems to genuinely want each other to succeed, he observed. That's the culture we built. Competition has its place, but collaboration creates exponentially better results. Colin spent an entire afternoon with our financial literacy team, learning about their community outreach programs. He came away energized and full of ideas for his own nonprofit. Seeing how you've scaled impact while maintaining personal connection to the mission, it's exactly what I want to achieve, he told me. The most meaningful moment came on our fourth day when Emma asked if she could present her marine biology research to my team. She had prepared a presentation about ocean plastic pollution and its impact on marine life. Standing in the same conference room where I had pitched to countless investors and partners, my 10-year-old niece delivered a passionate, well-researched presentation that moved several people to tears. Aunt Elena taught me that having big ideas isn't enough. You have to take action to make them real. That's why I want to start an ocean cleanup project at my school. The spontaneous, standing ovation she received was genuine. My colleagues were genuinely impressed by her research and presentation skills. But more than that, I realized Emma had internalized the lessons about turning passion into purpose that had driven my own journey. That evening, as we sat on my deck watching the sunset, my father surprised me with a conversation I hadn't expected. "I've been thinking about legacy this week," he began, "about what we leave behind and how we measure a life well lived." He gestured toward the view before us. "All of this is impressive, Alina. The house, the success, the recognition. But what strikes me most is the ripple effect of your choices. Every person we've met this week has been touched by your work in some way." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I spent my career focused on building wealth and status. You've built something more valuable, a network of positive impact that will continue long after you're gone." My mother, who had been quietly listening, added her perspective. "I've watched you this week with your colleagues, with the young entrepreneurs, with Emma. You lead by inspiring others to be their best selves. That's a rare gift." Spencer nodded in agreement. "You've shown us what success looks like when it's aligned with purpose. It's not about the money or recognition. Those are just byproducts. It's about using your talents to lift others up." On our final evening together, I gathered my family for one last dinner at my favorite restaurant overlooking the bay. As we shared stories and laughter, I reflected on how dramatically our relationships had evolved. The family that had once made me feel invisible now saw me clearly, not just my achievements, but my character, my values, my impact on others. More importantly, I saw them clearly too, understanding the fears and pressures that had shaped their earlier behavior. Emma leaned against me as we watched ships pass under the Golden Gate Bridge. "Aunt Elena, when I grow up, I want to build something important like you did." "You already are building something important," I told her. "Every time you ask questions, every time you stand up for something you believe in, every time you encourage someone else to dream bigger, you're building a better world." As we prepared to say goodbye at the airport, the hugs felt different, warmer, more genuine, full of love rather than obligation. These weren't the strained farewells of my childhood, but the reluctant partings of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "This isn't goodbye," Grant said as he hugged me. "It's see you soon." Spencer handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was an architectural sketch of a family portrait, not a photograph, but a building design that somehow captured the essence of our family's transformation. "It's my design for the Richardson Family Foundation headquarters. If you're ever ready to expand your philanthropic work, I'd love to create a space worthy of your vision." As their plane disappeared into the clouds, I felt a profound sense of completion. The empire I had built was no longer just about personal success, it had become a foundation for lifting others, including the family that had once left me behind.
1 year after that life-changing Thanksgiving, I find myself reflecting on the empire I've built. Not just the business empire that brought me financial freedom, but the empire of authentic relationships that brought me something far more valuable: true belonging. The Richardson Foundation has grown beyond my wildest expectations. We've now supported over 200 women entrepreneurs, opened offices in 5 countries, and been recognized by the United Nations for our innovative approach to economic empowerment. But the statistics, impressive as they are, pale in comparison to the individual stories of transformation. Just last month, Maria Santos, the young woman my mother met during their San Francisco visit, called to tell me her immigrant services app had been acquired by a major tech company for $50 million. She's using the proceeds to expand free legal aid services nationwide. "You didn't just fund my startup," she told me through tears of joy. "You taught me to believe in myself when no one else would." These conversations remind me daily that success isn't measured by personal wealth, but by the positive impact we have on others' lives. My family has become unrecognizable from the group that forgot me that Thanksgiving morning. Emma, now 11, video calls me every weekend to share her latest marine biology discoveries. She started an ocean cleanup club at her school that's already collected over 3,000 pounds of plastic waste. "Aunt Alina, guess what?" she said during our last call. "Mom and Dad are taking me to the Monterey Bay Aquarium for my birthday. They said we can arrange a private tour because you know people there." The fact that Grant and Jessica now actively support Emma's scientific interests rather than pushing her toward more traditional pursuits shows how much they've internalized the lessons from our family transformation. Spencer's sustainable housing firm has become one of the most respected companies in Chicago. Using principles he learned during his San Francisco visit, he's created affordable, eco-friendly communities that serve as models for urban development nationwide. Last month, he was featured on the cover of Architectural Digest. More importantly, he seems genuinely happy for the first time in years. "I wake up excited about work," he told me. "When your passion aligns with your purpose, it doesn't feel like work at all." Colin's nonprofit has exceeded all expectations. His financial literacy program has reached over 10,000 families, and he's been invited to speak at conferences across the country. He calls me regularly for advice, but our conversations have evolved from seeking approval to genuine collaboration between equals. "You showed me that leaving a high-paying job wasn't career suicide. It was career resurrection. I'm finally doing work that matters." The changes in my parents have perhaps been the most profound. My mother completed her business law certification and now sits on the board of 3 organizations supporting women entrepreneurs. She's found a way to reclaim the dreams she abandoned decades ago while helping others avoid her mistakes. My father has become one of my most trusted advisors. He refers clients to our foundation regularly and has helped us navigate complex legal and financial challenges. More importantly, he's learned to ask about my life with genuine interest rather than judgment. "I spent so many years trying to control your path," he told me during a recent call. "I missed the opportunity to simply appreciate the remarkable person you were becoming." But perhaps the most meaningful development came 3 months ago, when my mother called with an unexpected request. "Elena, I've been thinking about something. Would you consider letting me work with the foundation directly? I know I have a lot to make up for, but I'd like to spend my remaining years supporting young women the way I should have supported you." The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who had once tried to discourage my ambitions now wanted to dedicate her life to encouraging others' dreams. But her offer felt genuine, born from real transformation rather than guilt. She now leads our Chicago office, bringing decades of life experience to her mentorship of young entrepreneurs. Watching her encourage women to take risks she was once too afraid to take has been incredibly healing for both of us. Last week, I received an invitation that would have been unimaginable 2 years ago. Harvard Business School invited me to deliver the keynote address at their annual Women's Leadership Conference. The topic? Building Empires of Impact When Success Serves Others. As I prepared my speech, I thought about how to summarize the journey from forgotten daughter to recognized leader. The answer came to me clearly. True success isn't about proving your worth to others. It's about recognizing your own worth and using it to lift others up. The greatest gift from that painful Thanksgiving morning wasn't the revelation of my financial empire, but the realization that I no longer needed their validation to feel complete. Once I stopped seeking their approval, I could engage with them from a place of strength rather than need. And paradoxically, that's when they finally began to see me clearly. So I ask you, have you had to stand in your truth when others couldn't see your value? What kind of empire are you building in your own life? Your worth doesn't diminish when others fail to recognize it. The most valuable empire you can build isn't made of money or status. It's built from authenticity, compassion, and the courage to use your gifts in service of something larger than yourself. Share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their value isn't determined by others' ability to see it. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth doesn't decrease because someone else failed to see it. But when you finally see it yourself and use it to build something meaningful, that's when you discover the most valuable empire of all.